The joke that shouldn't have happened. Roger had been humiliated before. He had been laid off, evicted once in his 30s, and had spent years pretending everything was fine while struggling to raise his daughter alone. But standing in front of hundreds of wealthy guests while people laughed at him? That was a different kind of pain. Roger tightened his grip on the invitation in his hand and wished he had never come. The grand charity gala filled the ballroom with expensive suits, sparkling jewelry, and conversations that sounded like they belonged to another world. Roger's worn jacket suddenly felt 10 years older than it actually was. He wasn't there for himself. He was there for Elisa. 19-year-old Elisa had earned a scholarship to a prestigious business program. One of the sponsors had invited selected students and their families to attend the event. Roger had been proud, very proud. He had spent 2 hours ironing his only suit. Now he wished he had stayed home. "Dad, relax," Elisa whispered. Roger forced a smile. "I'm fine," but he wasn't. People kept looking at him, not because he had done anything wrong, because he clearly didn't belong. Across the room stood Victoria Sterling, the 28-year-old billionaire heiress everyone seemed obsessed with. She had inherited one of the largest luxury automotive companies in the country after her father's death 3 years earlier. Beautiful, powerful, untouchable. At least that's how the media described her. Roger hadn't paid much attention until she walked onto the stage. The auction portion of the evening was beginning. Several luxury items were sold for enormous amounts. Then Victoria smiled into the microphone. "And finally," she said, "we have one last item." The ballroom lights shifted. A photograph appeared on a giant screen. The audience looked confused. So did Roger. It was a rusty old car. The thing looked like it belonged in a junkyard. Laughter spread through the room. Victoria laughed too. "My father refused to get rid of this thing. For some reason, he kept it in storage for decades." More laughter. Frankly, nobody knows why. Roger barely paid attention. Then Victoria continued. "Since tonight is about giving opportunities to ordinary people, I thought we'd do something fun." Her gaze moved across the crowd. Then it stopped. On Roger. The room suddenly became very quiet. Roger felt his stomach tighten. Victoria smiled. "You," he blinked. "Me? Yes, what's your name?" Roger, would you like a free car tonight?" More laughter. Roger's face grew hot. He immediately understood. The joke wasn't the car. The joke was him. Someone from the staff hurried over with paperwork. Victoria smiled for the audience. "Congratulations! The car is yours." The crowd applauded. Some genuinely, others because they found it entertaining. Roger wanted to disappear. Elisa's jaw tightened. "Dad, let's leave." But Roger stood frozen. His pride was screaming at him to refuse, yet another voice inside him spoke louder. "You need transportation." His old pickup truck was barely surviving. Repairs cost money he didn't have, so he swallowed his pride. "Thank you," he said quietly. Victoria nodded and moved on. The audience forgot about him within seconds, but Elisa didn't. As they walked toward the exit later that night, she looked back at the stage. There was anger in her eyes. "She embarrassed you," Roger sighed. "Let it go. No, it's just a car." Neither of them noticed an elderly man standing nearby, a man who had worked for Victoria's father for over 40 years. He had watched the entire scene unfold, and when he heard Roger say, "It's just a car," the old man's expression changed completely, because he knew something nobody else in that ballroom knew. The rusty car sitting in storage wasn't worthless, not even close. In fact, hidden beneath decades of dust was one of the rarest automobiles ever built. A vehicle collectors had spent years searching for, a vehicle worth more than $7 million. And Victoria Sterling had just given it away, for free, to the one man in the room who had no idea what he had just received. Hashtag Part 2, A Secret Under the Rust. Laughter, the fake applause, and Victoria Sterling's smug smile kept replaying in his head. By morning, he had already convinced himself the gift was useless. Still, he took Elisa with him to the storage facility. The car sat there exactly as expected, rusted, dull, forgotten. Elisa frowned. "This is what she gave you?" Roger shrugged. "Maybe scrap value." A man nearby stepped forward, elderly, calm, watching the car too closely. "My name is Walter," he said. Something in his tone made Roger pause. "Henry Sterling for decades." Elisa stiffened at the name. Walter stepped closer to the vehicle. "This isn't junk." Roger let out a short laugh. "It looks like junk." Walter didn't smile. "It's a prototype." That word hit differently. He explained carefully. Only a few of these cars were ever built. Most were destroyed, or so the public believed. Roger frowned. "So what does that mean?" Walter pulled out old photographs. Same car, same markings, same identity code. Roger's expression slowly changed. Elisa leaned in. "Is it valuable?" Walter exhaled. "Extremely." Roger looked confused. "How extremely?" Walter hesitated. "Around 7 million. Silence dropped instantly. Roger blinked like he hadn't heard correctly. Elisa whispered, "That's impossible." Walter lowered his voice. "And there's something worse." Roger tensed. "What now?" Walter glanced around carefully. People have been searching for this car for years, not just collectors. Roger felt the air shift. "Then who?" he asked. Walter looked him dead in the eye. "The kind of people who don't ask twice before taking it back." Outside the warehouse, a black SUV slowly rolled into view and didn't stop. Before we continue, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever loved someone with a truly pure heart, make sure to subscribe to this channel so you never miss these amazing stories. The mistake becomes public. Roger spent the entire drive home in silence. $7 million. The number didn't feel real. Even after Walter showed him the photographs and identification records, Roger struggled to believe it. A man who spent years worrying about every bill was suddenly being told he owned something worth more money than he could imagine. Elisa sat beside him, equally stunned. "Dad, what are we going to do?" Roger kept his eyes on the road. "I honestly don't know." Unfortunately, they didn't have much time to think. By the next morning, the story had leaked. Someone from the gala had discovered the truth and posted it online. Within hours, news websites were reporting that billionaire heiress Victoria Sterling had accidentally given away a rare prototype automobile worth millions. The story exploded. People shared it everywhere. Most were shocked. Others found it hilarious. Meanwhile, inside her corporate headquarters, Victoria Sterling stared at her phone in disbelief. "What do you mean it's worth 7 million? The company's automotive historian nervously nodded. "The records are accurate." Victoria felt her stomach drop. The room became silent. For the first time since inheriting her father's empire, she looked genuinely shaken. She remembered the gala, she remembered Roger, and suddenly the memory didn't look funny anymore. It looked cruel. Back at Roger's small house, reporters began gathering outside. Phones rang nonstop. Collectors sent messages. Luxury auction houses made offers. One collector offered $5 million without even inspecting the vehicle. Roger ignored them all. The attention made him uncomfortable. He just wanted peace. That evening, Walter arrived unexpectedly. His face looked serious. "Lock your doors tonight." Roger frowned. "What happened?" Walter stepped inside and lowered his voice. "I made some calls. Certain people are interested in the car." "Interested how?" Walter hesitated. "Not everyone plans to buy it legally." Elisa immediately stiffened. Roger's expression hardened. For the first time, the situation felt dangerous. Then a sound came from outside. A vehicle stopped near the house. All three looked through the window. A black luxury SUV sat across the street. The same SUV that had been outside the storage warehouse. Its engine remained running. Waiting, watching. Nobody got out. Nobody spoke, but the message was clear. Someone had found them, and whoever it was wasn't interested in making a friendly offer. As Roger stared at the SUV, his phone suddenly rang. An unknown number. After a moment he answered. A calm male voice spoke. "Mr. Roger, I'd like to discuss your car." Roger's instincts immediately told him something was wrong. Then the stranger added a sentence that sent a chill through the room. "You should sell it quickly." A brief pause followed. "Before someone gets hurt." Part 4. An apology arrives too late. Roger didn't sleep that night. The threat on the phone kept replaying in his mind. The black SUV had finally left, but the feeling of being watched remained. By morning, Elisa was checking the windows every few minutes, while Roger tried to act calm. Neither of them succeeded. Around noon, another vehicle pulled up outside the house. This time it wasn't an SUV. It was a sleek black sedan. A woman stepped out. Elisa immediately recognized her. "So she finally came." Roger looked through the window. Victoria Sterling, the billionaire heiress herself. She stood outside for a moment before walking toward the front door. Roger wasn't sure whether to laugh or close the curtains. A few seconds later, the doorbell rang. Neither of them moved. Then it rang again. Finally, Roger opened the door. Victoria looked different without cameras and reporters around. Less confident, less polished, almost nervous. "Mr. Roger," she said quietly. Roger crossed his arms. "What do you want?" Victoria took a breath. "I came to apologize." The answer surprised him. Not because he expected an apology, because he hadn't expected her to say it so directly. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Elisa stepped forward. "You're apologizing?" Now Victoria looked at her. "Yes. After embarrassing my father in front of hundreds of people?" Victoria lowered her eyes. "I deserve that." Roger noticed something unusual. She wasn't defending herself. She wasn't making excuses. Still, the memory of that night remained fresh. "You thought it was funny," Roger said. Victoria swallowed. "At the time I did." The honesty caught him off guard. Most wealthy people would have hidden behind excuses. Victoria didn't. "I thought it was a harmless joke," she continued. "I was wrong." She looked directly at Roger. "When I learned the car's true value, I started reviewing old company records." Roger frowned. "What records?" "My father's private files." Something changed in her expression. For the first time, she looked emotional. There were notes about the vehicle. Walter had mentioned similar records. Roger listened carefully. Victoria continued. "My father wasn't protecting the car because of its value." Roger exchanged a glance with Elisa. "What do you mean?" Victoria hesitated. "He believed someone inside the company wanted it." The room became quiet, very quiet. "Someone tried to steal it years ago," she said. "The attempt failed, but my father never trusted certain people afterward." Roger felt a knot form in his stomach. The situation was becoming bigger than he expected, much bigger. Then Victoria reached into her purse and handed him a business card. "My private security team." Roger looked at it but didn't take it seriously. "We're fine." "No," Victoria said firmly. "You aren't." Her sudden seriousness surprised everyone. She glanced toward the window toward the street. Then she lowered her voice. "I had someone follow me here." Roger's face hardened. "What?" Victoria nodded. "I noticed the same SUV behind me." Elisa's eyes widened. The same SUV again. Victoria stepped closer. "They aren't watching me." Her gaze moved toward Roger. "They're watching you." At that exact moment, a loud crash echoed outside. All three rushed toward the window. A brick had shattered the front yard light. Attached to it was a folded piece of paper. Roger ran outside and picked it up. The message contained only 6 words. "Sell the car. Last warning." When Roger looked up, the black SUV was already disappearing down the street, and for the first time, Victoria Sterling looked genuinely afraid. The truth behind the shadow. After the warning, the house didn't feel like a home anymore. Roger kept the curtain shut. Elisa barely touched her food. Victoria stayed longer than anyone expected, sitting at the kitchen table like she belonged there, even though everything about her life said she didn't. Walter arrived an hour later. He didn't look surprised when he saw Victoria. "I figured you'd come," he said. Victoria nodded once. "We don't have time to fight over the past. We need answers." Roger leaned back in his chair. "Start talking, all of you." Walter placed an old folder on the table. It looked worn, like it had been hidden for years. "This car wasn't just a prototype," he said. "It was part of a private project your father ran with a small circle of engineers." Victoria frowned. "I know about the prototypes. You know the public version," Walter corrected, "not the real one." He slid a photograph forward. It showed the same car, but brand new, not rusted, parked inside a private hangar. Elisa leaned closer. "So, what changed it?" Walter hesitated. "Something was installed inside it." Roger's voice lowered. "What kind of something?" Before Walter could answer, Victoria spoke. "A sealed experimental engine system," she said slowly. "My father hinted at it once. Said it was never meant to go into production." Walter nodded. "Not just the engine, a data core." Silence filled the room. Roger blinked. "Data core?" Victoria's expression tightened. "Information storage?" "Yes," Walter said, "but not ordinary data. Financial records, private transactions, names, agreements, everything your father wanted protected." Elisa sat back. "So the car is basically a vault. That's why it was hidden," Walter replied. Roger exhaled slowly. "And someone wants it bad enough to threaten us." Victoria's face darkened. "Not just someone. A group." That word changed the mood instantly. Roger stared at her. "What group?" Victoria didn't answer right away. She looked down at her hands. Then she said it. "Some of my father's former board members. They were removed after his death, but they never left the company network completely." Voice sharpened. "So they're trying to erase it. Or take it," Walter said. "Either way, they don't want it in public hands." A heavy silence followed. Roger rubbed his forehead. I just want to understand something. Why me? Out of everyone at that gala, why hand it to me as a joke?" Victoria looked genuinely unsettled now. "I didn't choose you," she admitted. "I picked randomly. I thought it was harmless." Her voice dropped. "But it wasn't." A loud knock suddenly hit the front door. Everyone froze. Another knock followed, harder this time. Walter stood up slowly. Nobody opened it. Roger looked through the small side window. The same black SUV was back, but this time there was a second vehicle behind it. Victoria whispered, "They found us faster than I expected." The knock turned into banging. A voice shouted from outside, "Open the door. We know the car is here." Elisa stepped closer to Roger. "Dad." Roger looked at Victoria, then Walter. For the first time he realized this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about survival, and whatever was inside that rusty car was worth killing for. Hashtag Part 6, the night they chose to run. The banging on the door didn't stop. It got worse. Each Udar felt like it was pulling the house apart piece by piece. Roger stayed still for a moment, listening, calculating, trying to think like a man who had never been in danger before, but now had no choice. Elisa grabbed his arm. "Dad, they're not going to leave." Victoria was already moving. "They won't. Not until they get what they came for." Walter stood near the window, eyes scanning the street. There are at least 4 of them outside, possibly more in the other vehicle. Roger's jaw tightened. "So what now, we just hand it over?" Victoria shook her head immediately. "If we do that, we lose control, and they'll erase every trace of what's inside that car." Another hard slam hit the door. The lock shifted slightly. That was the moment Roger made his decision. "No," he said quietly. All three turned toward him. He looked at Elisa first. "Get your bag. Only essentials." Elisa didn't argue. She ran upstairs. Victoria stared at him. "You're choosing to run?" Roger met her eyes. "I'm choosing to stay alive." Walter nodded slowly, like he respected the shift. "Back exit?" Roger pointed toward the kitchen. "Old service door. Leads to the alley." The banging outside turned into shouting. "We know you're inside!" Glass vibrated in its frame. Elisa came back down in less than a minute, backpack on her shoulders, breathing fast. "Ready," she said. Roger opened the kitchen cabinet and pulled out a small toolbox. Not weapons, just tools. If anything broke, he needed options. Victoria watched him. "You're calmer than I expected." Roger gave a short laugh without humor. "I've had a lifetime of things breaking. You learn not to panic every time something new does." Walter checked the hallway again. Now, they moved. Roger led them through the kitchen toward the back door. Outside, the night air felt colder than it should have. The alley was narrow, dim, and quiet. Too quiet. They stepped out carefully. For a brief moment, it felt like they might actually escape cleanly. Then a voice cut through the darkness. "Going somewhere?" A man stood at the far end of the alley, tall, calm, watching. Behind him, two more figures emerged from the shadows. Roger pulled Elisa slightly behind him. Victoria's face tightened. "You followed me." The man smiled. "We follow what belongs to us." Walter stepped forward slightly. "This isn't yours." The man tilted his head. It was never his either. He nodded toward Roger. Roger's grip tightened on the toolbox. The man continued, voice steady. "Last chance. Hand over the car key and location. We'll leave quietly." Victoria spoke first. "And if we refuse," the man didn't hesitate, "then you make this more expensive than it needs to be." A sudden sound came from behind them. The front house door burst open. More footsteps. They were surrounded. Roger looked at Elisa, then at Victoria, then Walter, and for the first time since this began, he realized something terrifying. There was no clean way out anymore, only choices that would change everything. Victoria whispered, "We don't survive this if we stay separated." Roger nodded once. "Then we stop running." The man in front smiled wider. "Good choice." But Roger wasn't looking at him anymore. He was looking at the street beyond the alley, where a moving truck had just turned the corner and was heading straight toward them. What the car was protecting. The moving truck didn't slow down. It came straight into the alley like it belonged there. Everyone froze for a split second, confusion hitting harder than fear. Then the back doors of the truck swung open while it was still moving. Walter reacted first. "Move!" Roger grabbed Elisa and pulled her back just as the truck screeched to a stop between them and the armed men. Dust filled the alley. When it cleared, a new figure stepped down from the truck. A woman in her 40s, calm, controlled, wearing a simple black coat like she had done this kind of thing before. Victoria's expression changed instantly. "You," she said. The woman nodded once. "Yes." One of the men from the shadows called out, "Move aside. This isn't your operation." The woman didn't even look at him. "It is now." She turned slightly toward Roger. "You're holding something they've been hunting for years," she said. Roger frowned. "And you are?" "My name doesn't matter. What matters is what's inside the car." Walter stepped forward cautiously. "You're not board security." The woman gave a small smile. "No, I'm what your father created when he stopped trusting board security." Nauden nodded again. "I was assigned to the hidden assets. That includes the prototype." The armed man in the alley shifted his stance. "Enough talk. Move!" The woman finally looked at him, and her voice changed. Colder. "Last warning. Leave now." The man laughed. That was a mistake, because in the next second something subtle happened. Not a gunshot, not a fight, just a signal. From the truck. and suddenly the entire situation shifted. The moving truck's side panel opened. Inside was not cargo. It was a mobile security unit. Screens flickered on, encrypted systems booted up, and a digital lock sequence began running across a large monitor. Elisa whispered, "What is that?" The woman answered without looking away from the attackers. "It's the car's secondary system." Roger stared. "Secondary system?" Walter's face darkened. "The core wasn't just stored in the vehicle." Victoria finished the thought quietly. "It was distributed." The woman nodded. "The car is only half the vault." The attackers stopped smiling now. One of them shouted, "Shut it down!" But it was too late. The system had already begun unlocking something remotely tied to the rusted prototype. A low vibration echoed from the street. Then headlights appeared, a sound like metal awakening. Far away, at the storage facility, the rusty car's internal system was activating for the first time in years. Back in the alley, the woman stepped closer to Roger. "You were never the target," she said. Roger frowned. "Then what am I?" Her answer came quietly. "You're the trigger." Victoria's eyes widened. "That means—" The woman cut her off. "Yes. Someone had to legally possess the car for the system to activate without detection." Roger stepped back slightly. "You're telling me I was used?" The woman shook her head. "Chosen." A sudden crack echoed from the truck screens. Data began streaming. Names, transactions, hidden transfers, board member identities. The attackers finally understood. This wasn't about a car. It was about exposure. And Roger wasn't holding $1 million prototype. He was holding the key that was about to destroy powerful people who had spent years burying the truth. The lead attacker lowered his weapon slightly, because for the first time, he looked afraid. And that was when the woman turned to Roger and said, "Now you decide what kind of man you are. Because once this finishes uploading, there's no going back." Banki 8, Part 8, The Price of Truth. The alley fell into a strange kind of silence. Not peaceful, not safe, just frozen. Like the world was waiting to see what Roger would do next. The screens inside the moving truck kept scrolling data. Names, transfers, hidden agreements. Deals made in the dark when nobody was supposed to be watching. The attackers had stopped advancing. Not because they were defeated, because they were exposed. One of them slowly lowered his weapon. "If this finishes uploading, we're finished." The woman in black didn't look at him. "You were finished the moment you started hiding the truth." Roger stood still, feeling something shift inside him. A man who had spent his life avoiding trouble was suddenly standing at the center of something that could shake powerful people across the country. Elisa stepped closer to him. "Dad, what happens now?" He didn't answer right away. Victoria's voice was quieter than before. "Now everything comes out." Walter looked exhausted, like years of secrets had finally caught up with him. Henry Sterling knew this day would come. That's why he built a system that required an ordinary person to trigger it. Roger let out a short, humorless breath. "So I was the safest option," the woman corrected him. "The most unpredictable one. That's what made it safe." The attackers exchanged uneasy looks. One of them spoke into a radio, but no response came. The signal was already being jammed. The system inside the truck locked them out completely. Then, suddenly, the screens shifted. A final confirmation message appeared. "Upload complete." A low electronic tone followed, and somewhere far away, servers began distributing the files. Victoria closed her eyes for a moment. "This is going to destroy my company," she said quietly. Walter answered without hesitation. "It was already corrupted. This just proves it." Roger turned to her. "So what happens to you?" Victoria met his eyes. For the first time, she didn't look like a billionaire heiress. Just a woman facing consequences she didn't fully control. "I fix it," she said, "or I lose everything trying." Roger nodded slowly. The woman in black stepped back toward the truck. Security forces are already moving in. This area will be sealed within minutes." The attackers began backing away, realizing there was nothing left to win. One of them looked at Roger. "You think you won?" he said bitterly. Roger shook his head. "No, I think it finally stopped being about winning." Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. The woman looked at Roger one last time. "You did better than most would have," she said. "You didn't sell it, you didn't run, you didn't hide." Roger gave a tired smile. "I almost did all three." She nodded once. "That's why it worked." Then she climbed into the truck. It started moving again, disappearing into the night like it had never been there. Silence returned to the alley, but this time it felt different, lighter, real. Elisa looked at her father. "So, what now?" Roger looked at her for a long moment. The fear was still there, but something else had replaced it. Clarity. "We go home," he said softly, "and we start over." Victoria stepped closer. "And me?" Roger thought for a second, then nodded toward her. "You fix what you broke, and don't run from it." She gave a small, tired smile. "That sounds harder than surviving that alley." Walter let out a quiet laugh for the first time. As sirens grew louder, Roger finally looked up at the night sky. He had been given a joke, a rusty car nobody wanted. But it had turned out to be something else entirely, a truth buried too long, a system designed to protect itself, and a life that forced him to stand when running would have been easier. In the days that followed, the story would spread across the world. A billionaire heiress who lost control, a father who accidentally triggered a buried scandal, and a daughter who watched her life change overnight, but stayed beside him through all of it. Victoria rebuilt her company from the ruins of honesty. Walter finally stepped out of the shadows he had lived in for years. And Roger? He didn't become rich overnight, but he became something he never expected, a man who no longer bowed to fear. Because sometimes life doesn't give you what you want, it gives you what reveals who you are. And in the end, the rusty car wasn't a joke at all. It was the beginning of everything. Sometimes what looks worthless hides a truth powerful enough to change lives. And when life forces ordinary people into extraordinary situations, courage isn't about being fearless. It's about choosing honesty and responsibility even when everything feels out of control. We all get moments like Roger's, and in those moments we learn who we really are. We got this.